Picture this. You're kneeling on the cold, rush-strewn floor of a stone hall, rough wool scratching your knees, breath fogging in the air. The only light comes from torches flickering against damp walls, their smoke mixing with the stench of sweat and old wine. You can taste fear on your tongue. All around you, armored men line the benches. Lords, knights, their faces masked in shadow and contempt. At the far end, upon a carved oak chair, the local lord fixes you with eyes that feel colder than steel. You're stripped to your linen underclothes, your cloak and dignity left at the door. Tonight, humiliation is the entertainment, and you are the performance. But as the laughter begins to swell and the first command rings out, you realize this is no passing spectacle. This is the beginning of a ritual that will erase everything you thought untouchable. You may survive the night, but you will not leave as yourself. You were raised to believe that the medieval world was ruled by codes of chivalry, that knights and nobles valued honor above all, that even enemies deserved respect in defeat. Perhaps you thought punishment meant the stocks, a fine, a night in the dank village jail. Embarrassing, but survivable. But the reality is far more twisted. Medieval lords understood something modern power rarely dares admit. If you want to destroy a rival, you must not just defeat their body, you must break their spirit. And nothing shattered a man faster than stripping him, literally and symbolically, before his own people. Think public shaming is a modern invention? The medievals wrote the rules. Their rituals of exposure and sexual humiliation make today's scandals look like playground gossip. In some regions, a noble's defeat meant being paraded naked on horseback through his own lands, forced to recite confessions in front of jeering peasants. Imagine your enemies, neighbors, old rivals, former vassals, summoned to watch as your body and secrets are bared for the crowd. What would it take to survive that kind of night? And what does it do to a community that learns to laugh at another man's shame? But here's where it gets truly disturbing. These weren't acts of chaotic vengeance. This was a system, codified, ritualized, performed with a precision that still echoes in dusty legal rolls and letters from trembling witnesses. In the year 1314, after the failed rebellion of Roger Mortimer, historical records from the English royal court describe not just executions, but intricate ceremonies of staged humiliation. The rebels' closest men, stripped to their shirts and drawers, were paraded before the king's household, forced to kneel and confess, while the crowd hurled taunts and scraps of bread. Those who refused faced corrections so specific they read like instructions for theater, not justice. You might want to look away, but it's impossible, because as the torches flare and the laughter grows cruel, you sense a boundary being crossed. The Lord doesn't simply punish your body. He reclaims your very personhood. Each act, each order to kneel, each forced gesture, each garment removed in front of 100 eyes, is designed to invert the old hierarchy. You are no longer a noble. You are a living cautionary tale, a vessel for everyone's hidden fear that their own security is a fragile illusion. But how did medieval society arrive at a place where humiliation itself became a weapon? The roots run deep into law, religion, and the raw survival logic of feudal power. In the 12th and 13th centuries, chroniclers from France to the Holy Roman Empire record the use of public exposure rituals as punishment for treason, rebellion, and failure to pay homage. These were not impulsive acts but carefully staged events, often attended by clergy and enforced by written statute. Imagine standing before a cathedral's west doors, stripped bare while the bishop reads out your crimes, then commands you to perform a penance so intimate it will be retold in whispers for years. What you don't know is that the humiliation rarely ended in the hall or at the cathedral steps. For those branded as traitors or outcasts, the shame would echo for generations. Their wives might be summoned to confess their complicity in public, their daughters forced into symbolic acts of submission before the Lord's household. The chronicler Jean Froissart, writing in the late 14th century, details the fate of a captured enemy knight whose family was made to watch as he was stripped, whipped, and then displayed. His humiliation used as proof of the Lord's power and the family's defeat. "Let all see how the mighty are unmade," Froissart wrote. The ritual was never about justice. It was about spectacle, about sending a message no one could ignore. But here's where the nightmare sharpens. The Church, far from standing as a moral shield, often provided the rituals and language for these acts. Canon law, especially after the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, prescribed public penance for sins of the flesh, exposure for adulterers, and the shaming of defeated enemies as a necessary step toward communal purity. The line between penance and punishment blurred, until even the private sexual humiliation of prisoners could be justified as saving their souls. You might ask, where were the boundaries? The answer, in most cases, was simple. There were none. Can you feel the walls closing in? Because if you were in that hall, if you were the prisoner, the wife, the son, every breath, every glance, every snatch of mocking laughter would lodge itself in your memory forever. You would carry the humiliation long after the bruises faded, and the world you re-entered would never quite let you forget. This is just the surface. Tonight, you've seen the opening move, a single evening of ritual humiliation, orchestrated by the hands of power. But as the doors close and you're left in the echoing darkness, you realize something even worse. For the broken, the shamed, the corrected, the night is only beginning. What happens behind closed doors, beyond the reach of witnesses, is something almost no one dares to write down. Yet, in the secret archives and the fearful memories of survivors, the truth waits, darker and far more intimate than you could possibly imagine. You're on your knees still, eyes forced downward as the Lord's steward steps forward, a scrap of parchment in his hand. He reads aloud, voice echoing through the vaulted hall. Your name, your lineage, your supposed crimes. Each word strips away another layer of self, until you barely remember you were once a person with a place in this world. All around, the assembled crowd waits, the air thick with the scent of tallow and damp stone. Then the ritual begins. At first, it almost seems bearable. You're commanded to rise, to walk barefoot across the rushes before the entire assembly. Your feet sting against grit and splinters, but that isn't the point. It's the eyes, hundreds of them, judging, hungry, delighted. You're made to recite a confession you didn't write, crafted by your enemies, laced with innuendo and shame. I, who defied my true Lord, now submit my body and soul to his mercy. But here's where it gets worse. You are ordered to strip off your linen shirt, left only in your underclothes. Laughter erupts as a servant brings a basin of cold water. You are forced to wash yourself, slowly, under the gaze of every rival and vassal. This is no cleansing. It's a spectacle. Each gesture is scripted, every motion designed to suggest filth that only humiliation can purify. But humiliation in this hall is just the beginning. In 1327, after the failed Despencer Rebellion, historical records from the royal court describe precisely such a scene in London. Rebels and their families were brought before the king's inner circle, commanded to undress to their shifts, then parade in mock processions, sometimes chained, sometimes forced to kneel and kiss the feet of those who had once been their equals. Documents from the Clerk of Parliament detail corrections of the body and soul, and the order to expose all flesh but that which decency commands be hid, a formula meant not to protect, but to heighten the sting. You can feel your cheeks burning, not from cold, but from the heat of watching faces, the sneers of those who once came to you for favor. A steward's voice rings out. Let all present witness the humbling of pride. You're made to hold a wooden staff across your shoulders, head bowed. One by one, former allies are called to mock your defeat, each given a chance to speak a word of truth about your supposed betrayals. Their words cut deeper than any sword. Some recall debts unpaid. Others invent stories of lust, greed, or cowardice. stories that stick because there is no one left to defend you. The crowd roars, intoxicated by the power to judge. But here's what you don't see yet. For the Lord, this is not about punishment. It's about spectacle, and about warning everyone in this room what it costs to stand against him. A clerk reads from the Liber Niger, the great black book of the English royal household. In 1475, at the court of Edward IV, similar rituals are described. Defeated enemies made to kneel in public, stripped of belts and spurs, ancient symbols of knighthood, while chaste dames and virgins were summoned to witness their disgrace. Even the women of the household become participants in your humiliation, their presence a silent reminder that your shame is now communal property. And it doesn't end there. You're forced to stand, eyes forward, as the Lord dictates a confession of carnal sins, real or invented, meant to suggest not only treason, but a loss of control over your own body. Suddenly, the line between justice and performance disappears. You feel it in the laughter, in the faces of young squires too inexperienced to understand what this is doing to you, in the jostling of servants eager to show their loyalty by sneering at your weakness. One vassal, emboldened, calls out a ribald verse that sets the hall roaring. The ritual is contagious. Even the priest appointed to witness your penance turns away with a smile as the humiliation deepens. But the machinery of shame has more gears to grind. In certain lordly households, the punishment doesn't stop at confession. Legal documents from the court of the Duke of Burgundy in the 15th century describe defeated nobles forced into penitential processions. You are led, barefoot, half-naked, a rope about your neck, through the castle corridors, out into the courtyard, where the entire village gathers to watch. Peasants and children who once touched their caps in your presence now point and laugh. Let all see how the mighty fall, the Lord proclaims. The message is unmistakable. Your humiliation is not private, nor even limited to your own class. It's a festival, a drama that feeds the unity of the victorious and cements the power of those who rule. But here's where the humiliation sharpens to cruelty. For certain crimes, real or invented, the Lord can demand a ritual of reconciliation. In the year 1312, in the town of Avignon, records show the defeated party forced to crawl on hands and knees, kissing the Lord's ring, reciting confessions of sexual weakness or impurity. The Lord, towering above, plays both judge and audience. Even the act of begging for mercy becomes a display, a final stripping of self. When you rise, the world has changed. You are no longer yourself. You are a story that will be told and retold, a warning and a joke, all in one. It would be easier to imagine this is as far as it goes. But you're not done yet. Because as you're paraded past the hall, villagers and household staff lean in for a closer look, some jeering, some merely curious, all knowing that your story is no longer your own. And here's the chilling truth. The Lord's household keeps records of every humiliation, every confession, every tear and stumble. These are not just punishments. They're precedents, reminders, pieces of theater to be repeated when the next rebel must be broken. Right now, you feel the weight of centuries of ritualized shame pressing down on your shoulders. This discomfort you're experiencing, the prickle of sweat, the hollow ache where your pride used to be, the terror that you'll never escape the story they've written for you, is the recognition of a truth that most people will never face. If you want to keep uncovering these realities that history tried to bury, hit subscribe now and join the only community that dares to see the past as it truly was. Because the story isn't over, and the next revelation will make everything you've seen so far seem almost merciful. Because after the parade ends, after the torches are snuffed and the laughter fades, the true machinery of humiliation is just beginning to turn. What happens when shame is codified by law, blessed by the church, and used as a tool not just for discipline, but for domination? The worst is yet to come. You're led from the echoing great hall into the chill of the courtyard, night air biting at your exposed skin. Every step feels heavier than the last, as if the stone beneath your bare feet is absorbing your dignity. The humiliation isn't over, not by a long shot. Now it transforms into something colder, something permanent. You sense it in the way the steward reads your fate, voice unwavering, announcing that your shame is not just a spectacle, but a record, a legal fact inscribed into the memory of the land. And as you shiver beneath the watchful eyes of villagers, you realize what you endure tonight will follow you, sealed by the laws of men and the judgments of God. But here's where the machinery of power reveals its true shape. This isn't random cruelty, it's systematic, woven into the very code of the medieval world. Throughout the 14th and 15th centuries, the statutes of France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire all contained provisions for public penance, ritualized undressing, and forced confessions, especially for those who challenged their lord's authority. The infamous jus primae noctis, the supposed right of the Lord to claim a new bride on her wedding night, may have been rare in reality, but its terror was real enough. It was whispered as a threat, a tool for psychological domination. The ritual of undressing, forced not only upon defeated rivals but upon their wives or daughters, appears in legal rolls and chroniclers' accounts, a punishment for disobedience, a demonstration of ownership that left no doubt as to who held power. The laws made no secret of their intent. In the Siete Partidas, Alfonso X of Castile wrote of the necessity for public penance to cleanse the stain of rebellion, punishments that in practice blurred the lines between spiritual correction and personal annihilation. In 1399, after the defeat of Richard II in England, the chronicler Adam of Usk recorded how those of the former king's party were made to strip, to march barefoot through the streets, singing confessions, their garments cut to expose their shame. Even highborn prisoners were not spared. The spectacle was the point. By reducing the mighty to trembling figures before the crowd, the victors rewrote the rules of inheritance and legitimacy. Power was not transferred. It was torn, piece by piece, from the broken bodies of the humiliated. But the most disturbing element is how this system infected every level of society. You see it in the castle records of Burgundy, where the duke's clerks noted every act of penitential parade. A defeated knight might be forced to carry a wooden phallus through the streets, a grotesque parody meant to signify lost masculinity. Others endured symbolic acts, forced to wear women's clothes or to ride backwards on a donkey, their hands bound as the crowd jeered and threw offal. The humiliations weren't random. They were choreographed to strike at the core of personal and family identity. It doesn't stop at public shame. The ritual sometimes continues in private, behind closed doors, where the defeated are forced into confessions, written, signed, and witnessed, describing not only their political crimes but imagined sins of the flesh. The records of the Parliament of Paris, dated 1431, reveal forced confessions of sexual deviance, extracted from political prisoners as proof of their unfitness to rule. These documents were archived, circulated among the powerful, and sometimes read aloud at later assemblies. Imagine knowing that every word you spoke in desperation would be used to keep you silent for life. But here's where it gets even more twisted. The humiliation is never only about you. The law allows, and sometimes demands, that your family share your punishment. Chronicle after chronicle records the moment when the defeated lord's wife or daughter is summoned, stripped of her fine clothing, made to kneel in the dust beside you. In 1315, after the failed rebellion of Louis Deslet's barons, the chronicler Geoffrey of Paris describes the parade of the defeated, in which wives and daughters were marched before the village, veils torn away, hair unbound, and forced to join their husbands in public penance. The message was unmistakable. Resistance brings not only defeat, but generations of disgrace. But the system isn't satisfied until the mind is broken as surely as the body. The psychology of humiliation becomes the final weapon. You're not just shamed, you're taught to internalize it. Every element is designed for maximum destruction. The ritual undressing, the forced recitations, the laughter of old enemies, the presence of those you once protected. By the time the ordeal ends, you look for a corner to hide your face, but there is no escape. The chronicler Froissart writes of a young knight who, after suffering public exposure, spoke no word for a year and was seen only at night, wandering in rags, unable to bear the gaze of his own household. This is the aftermath most never witness, a legacy of humiliation that festers long after the crowd disperses. But here's the next thing no one tells you. These rituals didn't just destroy individuals, they reshaped entire societies. The legal records of the City of London in 1352 detail the shame processions of rebel guild leaders, forced to walk naked around the marketplace carrying placards that declared their crimes. Some never returned home, too broken to face their families. Others became cautionary tales, their lineages forever stained. The written confessions, the memory of exposure, the laughter of the crowd, these became part of the unwritten law of power. They ensured that the next challenger would hesitate, that the next rival would remember not only the risk of death, but the certainty of living shame. But the worst is still to come. Because as you are left trembling in the darkness after your ordeal, a new realization dawns. This was never just about revenge or discipline. It was about changing who you are, right down to the marrow. And in a world where memory is power, the scars of ritual humiliation become the most enduring form of control. You might think you've survived the worst, but medieval power was never satisfied with simple obedience. What happens when the church itself joins in? When the machinery of shame is sanctified, and confession is no longer just public, but eternal? You're about to discover how even the soul could be broken, one humiliation at a time. You think the ordeal must finally be ending. The crowd disperses, the laughter fades, and for a brief moment you almost believe that the worst is behind you. But then you hear the bells. The sharp, insistent clang of iron striking iron, summoning not just villagers but priests, monks, the whole machinery of salvation. Because in the medieval world, humiliation is not complete until your soul is laid bare. Now, the church steps forward, ready to sanctify your shame. You're escorted, still barefoot, still stripped of dignity, into the echoing nave of the village church. The scent of incense mixes with sweat and fear. Here, under the eyes of saints painted on crumbling walls, your humiliation becomes a public act of penance. The priest, draped in gold and scarlet, stands over you with a ledger. He reads from canon law. For crimes of rebellion, impurity, or pride, the only cure is public confession, body and soul. The parish is summoned to witness. No whisper is private, no secret safe. But here's where it becomes institutional horror. Inquisitors across Europe kept meticulous records of sexual penance, rituals designed to expose not just your deeds, but your desires. In 1232, in the Diocese of Toulouse, Bishop Fulk ordered the defeated Cathar nobles to stand naked before the altar, confessing sins of the flesh before the whole congregation. "Let shame teach humility," the bishop declared, as parishioners gawked and gossiped. In the records of the Fourth Lateran Council, there are pages describing public exposure for adulterers and rebels, forced naked processions, whippings in the churchyard, confessions so detailed they became a kind of public script, performed again and again. Now you kneel, trembling, as the priest recites the litany of your failings. He demands a confession not only of treason, but of imagined lust, weakness, unnatural desire. Each word is a nail in your coffin. You are made to repeat it all, with your family kneeling beside you, faces burning. The villagers murmur, children stare, and the priest, supposed guardian of mercy, asks questions so personal, so shaming, that you wish the earth would swallow you. The records of Abbot Odo of Cluny in 1104 describe the same. Penance must match the sin. Shame must fit the pride. For many, these moments marked the death of hope. But here's what most people never see. For the community, these rituals are entertainment. Chronicles from the 14th century Flanders tell of penitential parades turned into festivals, drunken crowds, musicians, food stalls, and jeering laughter echoing through the churchyard. Children are brought forward to witness the shaming, their lessons written in the humiliation of others. Songs are sung, verses composed, mocking the defeated, immortalizing the shame. The story of your fall will outlive you, repeated in song and rumor until your very name means only disgrace. Yet this normalization is more corrosive than any single punishment. When the whole village laughs, when the priest nods approval, humiliation becomes law. In Lübeck, 1420, civic records describe public processions for women of bad repute and disgraced soldiers, forced to wear straw crowns and walk with heads bowed while onlookers threw rotten fruit. The chronicler remarks, "Thus is order kept, and pride broken." By institutionalizing shame, society teaches everyone, peasants, children, even the next generation of lords, that dignity is a privilege, not a right. But here's where the horror deepens. The stories don't die in the moment. They live on, twisting through generations. In the letters of Lady Isabel of Angoulême, she writes of her father's disgrace. Though the bruises faded, the songs did not. My brothers grew up in shadow, and my mother never again walked with her head high across the channel. In the English shires, the court rolls of 1372 detail the punishment of a rebel's family. Wives stripped to shifts, daughters displayed in the marketplace, each forced to recite verses of contrition before the crowd. These were not isolated excesses. They were the expected order of things. Survivors sometimes left their own testimonies. In a parchment found in the ruins of a priory, a scribe writes, "I was made to undress in the winter wind, confess sins I did not commit, and bow before the priest while my neighbors watched. I no longer remember the warmth of my own home." These confessions are rare, preserved only because someone, somewhere, thought to keep the memory alive. More often, the records come from chroniclers and officials, those who benefited from the spectacle, not those who suffered it. But here's where the system tightens its grip. The church, the court, and the community become a single, unbreakable chain. Each institution confirms the other's authority. The abbot's sermon echoes the Lord's decree. The laughter in the street echoes the priest's questions. When shame becomes tradition, it can't be escaped, only inherited. And yet, for all the spectacle and cruelty, the true purpose is always the same: to create a lesson that lasts, not just for you, but for everyone who witnesses, everyone who hears the story. The humiliation is not an accident. It is the central ritual of power. To see it, to endure it, is to learn your place. But this world of ritualized shame is not satisfied until every last echo of defiance has been silenced. What happens when the spectacle reaches its peak? When the shaming parade turns deadly? When a family's honor is destroyed for good? You're about to step into the final, most chilling act of medieval humiliation, a place where even death brings no relief, and the story is never truly finished. You're awakened before dawn by rough hands and the clatter of iron keys. The air is bitter, stinking of straw and cold sweat, your body stiff from a night spent on bare stone. This is the day of the shaming parade, the climax of your defeat. As you rise, you catch your reflection in a bowl of water, eyes hollow, cheeks raw from salt tears. There's no time for dignity. You're ordered to dress, not in your own clothes, but in a patched, ill-fitting tunic marked with the Lord's colors, a walking signal of your subjugation. You're led through winding corridors to the outer gate, where the household staff has already assembled. The sun has not yet crested the trees, but the village is awake. News of your humiliation has traveled faster than any messenger. Children gather, their eyes wide with the thrill of danger. The bailiff calls your name, and you're marched into the street, barefoot, hands bound with coarse rope. A bell clangs, a signal that today's entertainment is about to begin. Here's where the ritual shifts from private to public theater. The villagers are ready. Some whisper, some jeer, others simply stare. You're forced to walk the length of the main road through mud and animal filth, each step marked by a shower of rotten vegetables, clods of earth, and mocking shouts. But it isn't the pain or the stench that cuts deepest. It's the laughter, the delighted cries of those who once called you Lord, neighbor, protector. The legal records from the court of Louis I in 15th century France detail these processions in chilling clarity. Let the defeated be displayed before all, so that his shame shall teach others humility. There is no anonymity. Your humiliation is meant to be remembered, but the worst is still to come. You're led to the village square, a place you once crossed with pride. Here, a scaffold has been erected. You're ordered to mount the steps where the steward recites your offenses: rebellion, arrogance, sins against the flesh. Your voice is demanded. You must confess each crime in front of the crowd. And then the symbolic acts begin. A wooden staff is placed in your hand, and you're made to enact the loss of your sword. You're forced to kneel, to bow your head, to beg forgiveness not just from your lord, but from the lowest of the village. Every movement is witnessed, every word becomes part of the new legend, how the mighty were made to crawl. This is not the end. The bailiff calls for your family. Your wife, dressed in a coarse shift, is brought forward. She must kneel beside you, her hair unbound, her head bare to the crowd. The records of the English court in 1372 detail such scenes. Wives and daughters forced to share the humiliation, kneeling in the marketplace, reciting prayers for mercy. The pain in your wife's eyes is worse than any blow. The crowd is merciless. Songs are sung, dirty rhymes composed on the spot. Even the children join in. You realize your shame will be passed down, told and retold until your family's name is synonymous with disgrace. But here's where the cruelty finds its sharpest edge. The law is clear. You must not only confess, you must perform a symbolic act of submission. In the Burgundian territories, defeated nobles were made to ride a donkey backwards around the square, hands tied, a mock crown of straw set upon their heads. In other places, you might be ordered to don women's clothing or to dance for the crowd, each act calculated to erase the last trace of your old self. The chronicler Jean de Wavrin writes of one such humiliation in 1453. He was made to crawl in the dust before his conqueror, and the laughter of the crowd drowned out his weeping. You sense the world closing in, each ritual a tightening circle. The purpose is not only to break you, but to reshape the memory of your power, so that even your enemies' children will remember only your disgrace. The community watches closely, hungry for every detail. Legal scribes record the events for the Lord's archives. Priests note your confessions for future sermons. The spectacle becomes history, and history becomes a weapon, forever ready to be turned against you or your kin. Yet the humiliation doesn't end with the parade. After you are released, battered and silent, you discover the invisible scars. Your house stands empty. Your servants have fled. Those who remain avoid your eyes. The power you once wielded has vanished, replaced by a new, unbreakable law, the law of public memory. For years, sometimes generations, your name will be a lesson. Inheritance is poisoned, alliances crumble, even your children's marriages shadowed by the echo of your shame. But here's where the terror deepens. The normalization of these rituals changes the very foundations of power. The chronicler Froissart records that even high-born men, kings in exile, were forced into displays of public penance, sometimes before the gates of rival cities, sometimes in front of their own betrayed vassals. The lesson is always the same. The only thing more enduring than power is the memory of humiliation. And in the medieval world, that memory is written in law, in song, and in the silence of those who dare not remember aloud. You might imagine that death would bring release, that the grave would bury the story with the bones. But the medieval world has one more lesson to teach. What happens when shame outlives the body, when the rituals of exposure follow you into death itself, ensuring your name is never spoken without a shudder? In the final act, even the comfort of oblivion is denied. You're about to witness how the machinery of humiliation writes its last, most unbreakable law, one that can never be undone. You think there can be nothing left to take. You have been stripped, marched, mocked, and made to perform your own undoing beneath the cold, clear gaze of your community. But the machinery of humiliation has a final, hidden chamber, a place where the stain becomes permanent, where even death is no escape. Picture this. You have survived the shaming parade, your voice forever altered by confessions you never meant, your body marked by rituals no one will let you forget. Yet, as you retreat to the dim solitude of your ruined home, a new decree is delivered. The Lord, not content with your living disgrace, issues a command for your burial. You are not to be interred in the family tomb or beneath the church's sacred ground. Instead, your grave is dug at the edge of the village, far from the protection of stone and prayer, unblessed, unmarked, an eternal signpost of your failure. The act is both spectacle and warning. Neighbors are summoned to witness as your body, wrapped in nothing but a coarse shroud, is dragged through the streets you once ruled. The priest reads aloud the sentence, "Let him be cast out, his name erased, his memory shunned." No bell is rung for your soul. No eulogy is spoken. In the chronicles of 14th century Mainz, such burials are described in chilling detail. Those cast out by the Lord's justice shall find no peace, neither in life nor in the afterlife. Let their shame stand as boundary between the righteous and the fallen. But here's where the horror becomes generational. The law requires your heirs to pay for the privilege of redemption, heavy fines, forced penance, even the forfeiture of ancestral lands. And yet, the stain persists. In the village, the place where you are buried is whispered about, children warned to keep away. Your descendants, no matter how virtuous, are marked as the children of disgrace. Legal rolls from Burgundy record entire lineages disinherited, their coats of arms defaced, their family names omitted from parish records. The humiliation, once enacted, cannot be erased. You might imagine this is only the fate of the great, the proud, the rebels. But the logic of ritualized shame trickles downward. Peasants accused of theft, women accused of carnal sins, even children marked as bastards. None are spared when the machinery of humiliation is in motion. The community learns to draw its boundaries with public suffering, to bind itself together through the spectacle of another's ruin. It is not just the Lord's power that is maintained, but the fragile security of everyone else, built on the certainty that shame can always find a new victim. In the centuries that follow, these stories become their own kind of scripture. Chroniclers write them down not to inspire pity, but to instruct and warn. The priest quotes your humiliation from the pulpit. The village storyteller adds flourishes to your downfall. The laws of inheritance are shaped around your disgrace. Even the landscape itself changes. Fields renamed, stones carved with new arms, the history of your defeat rising from the ground, as if to declare that humiliation is the most enduring kind of power. And yet, beneath the surface, something lingers. For every survivor broken in the public square, there is a family that remembers, quietly, bitterly, sometimes with a determination that refuses to die. In hidden letters and secret prayers, a different story survives. The memory of injustice, the quiet anger that waits for the next opportunity, the knowledge that no humiliation can be total so long as even a single witness remembers what was done. You came into this world believing that defeat meant death or exile. Now you understand that in medieval power it is humiliation, ritualized, systematic, passed down like a curse, that truly breaks a lineage. But you have also seen the limits of power. In the final reckoning, memory is never entirely controlled. The stories the victors write cannot silence every whisper, nor bind every conscience. Even the grave cannot fully bury the truth. Now that you've witnessed how medieval lords used sexual humiliation to destroy enemies, how shame became law, tradition, and legacy, you have seen what history tried to hide. If this journey has awakened your appetite for truth, subscribe now for access to revelations that textbooks dare not tell. The more you know about the systems that shaped our world, the more you see behind the illusions of power, and the more prepared you are to recognize the machinery of humiliation wherever it appears. The past is never gone. Its shadows linger in every law, every custom, every story you're told. You've walked through the hall of shame. You've seen how power writes itself on the bodies of the defeated. You carry that knowledge now, a shield and a warning. Where will you stand when the next ritual begins?